Okay, so my name is Michael Walker, and I'm a graduate student at the University of Colorado Boulder. And today I'd like to talk to you about the size of augmented reality telepresence avatars and how that can impact human communication. But first, why does that matter? Well, people are always looking for better methods of communicating with one another without having to travel great distances. Although still, most of us are perfectly fine traveling across a city, a country, or even the world just to meet face to face because telecommunication technology still doesn't quite match the real thing of meeting face to face, which is why we're all here at this conference this week. And with standard voice calls or even video conferencing, a key part that's missing is that aspect of presence that's so impactful in face-to-face meetings. And this is why people want to improve their sense of presence. So people have looked at multiple ways of doing so and have looked at more novel telecommunication technologies such as telepresence robots or even projecting a virtual avatar of oneself. And today I'll be focusing on the latter technology of telepresence avatars. And these avatars essentially create an illusion for the local user of the remote collaborator being present in the same environment. And local users can experience increased presence of the remote user and can in turn interact more naturally. We can leverage things such as nonverbal communication, such as body language, and with this increased presence, long-distance collaborators can command more attention as they become harder to ignore. They're no longer just a face on a screen or a disembodied voice. So overall, this increased presence allows us to have a more natural and impactful interaction with one another. But it begs the question, can we manipulate these avatars to either increase or decrease how the local user experiences the presence of the remote collaborator? And can we also maybe manipulate facets of this human avatar interaction such that maybe influence the influence or to affect how influential the remote operator is? So I want to touch on something that's pretty interesting about this avatar technology, is that we can alter the appearance of the avatar unlike other mediums of telecommunication technology. Because without actually changing the appearance of the remote user, we can change their hair, we can change their clothes or outfits, and we can even change their gender or age. We can do even more extreme alterations. We can make them an animal, or maybe a human-animal hybrid, or even an inanimate object altogether. So can we leverage this ability that's inherent in avatars, being able to drastically change their appearance to manipulate or influence social interactions between remote and local users using telepresence avatars? Well, based on research in the realm of human avatar interactions, the answer seems to be yes. Prior work has found that the appearance of avatars can significantly impact preconceptions humans have about the avatar. For example, form has found to influence perceived credibility and attractiveness, and form being whether the human is represented as a humanoid, animal, or some hybrid. Face is another important appearance characteristic that can influence trust, looking at the width to height ratio. A team face as well, which is created by taking physical features of members of a social group and combining them to make a single face. This type of avatar will receive more attention in social groups when compared to avatars that are lacking these shared characteristics. And finally, males are more influenced by female avatars and vice versa. So what about another key aspect of appearance of these avatars? Size. So size is a very important aspect of avatars, as there's many circumstances where one might not want a one-to-one exact copy of the size of the remote collaborator. Maybe we'd want the remote collaborator to be able to fit in our hand or on top of a table, or maybe we'd want them to appear much larger than real life. When looking for answers to this question, we can leverage prior work in the field of psychology, specifically in the area of human height in human-human interactions. And although height and size are not equivalent exactly, the two terms share a pretty strong relation. Where something increases in height, likely their size also increases. Research in this field has shown that there's a profound impact on human-human interaction when looking at height. And there's a positive correlation with perceived trustworthiness, workplace success, self-assurance, persuasiveness, expressiveness, attractiveness, composure, and the list goes on and on. we can see that height strongly influences many aspects of human communication. Additionally, previous research in the realm of human-robot interactions have shown that shorter robots are viewed as less conscientious than taller robots, which is kind of interesting. And shorter telepresence robots, specifically telepresence robots, are less persuasive in certain leader-follower configurations between local and remote users. So again, what about size in human avatar interactions? Would we see similar effects as we do with human-human interactions, or what about, or even human-robot interactions? Well, to answer this question, we set out to run an experiment of our own to examine whether or not size can influence these interactions between remote and local users using telepresence avatars. So to evaluate the effect of size, we of course created two avatars of different sizes. One was a human size that was set to be equal to the height of the participant, and the other was set to be a static half a meter tall as our small avatar. We used a Microsoft Kinect to track the body motions of a remote user using skeletal tracking, and we also synced up the avatar's mouth to match that of the remote user and procedurally animate it in real time. I'd also like to quickly mention that although the small avatar may look further away in this image, the distances are in fact equal, and both avatars are placed the same static distance from the local user in the experiment. So, in the experiment itself, we utilized an HTC Vive with the Z Mini AR stereo pass-through camera to allow the local user to see the avatar integrated within their own environment. And during the study, we had a confederate, which is essentially a researcher acting as another participant, call in from another location on campus as the remote user, and then complete with the real local participant two collaborative exercises drawn from prior research exploring leader-follower relationships. The first task being a hypothetical situation where a plane crash in the desert occurs, and the user is to rank survival items from least important to most important. So the remote and local users separately created their lists and then came together to go over their list together and create a consensus list. And this allowed us to measure how much influence the remote user had on the local user creating their consensus list. The second task consisted of the remote and local users taking turns proposing splits of cash from a hypothetical pool of money. And here the splits would either be accepted as is or rejected, where both participants or both users received nothing. And the subtask allowed us to see if participants were more or less willing to accept or propose unfair splits of resources. So in this study, we ran 40 participants as a between subjects design, where participants either saw the large avatar or small avatar, but never both. And the video shows the user midway through the desert survival task, where they're discussing the importance of each item and creating their consensus list together. And the Confederate remote user had a script that they'd follow with a pro and con argument for each item that was held constant between trials to keep debates as similar as possible between participants. Additionally, the Confederates' rankings were created procedurally after the local real participant submitted their rankings to create consistent difference in rankings between all trials. So results. So first, this is looking at the amount of influence the remote user had on the local participant. So this is looking at the difference between the initial ranked list the participants submitted and the final consensus list. So we were able to see how much influence the remote user had with their own list and arguments had on their local user. So the higher number, the more influence they had. So we can see that the equal-sized avatar had much more influence than the smaller-sized avatar in the final consensus list. Additionally, we looked at the percent of time that the remote user was visually focused on the avatar. This is just percent, and we see that the equal-sized avatar commanded much more attention than the smaller-sized avatar. So now I'm going to quickly go over some insights that we pulled from our objective, subjective measures, and also some from our free response questions we posed to users at the end of the study. So our first interesting takeaway is that local users didn't realize that the equal-sized avatar is more influential than the small avatar. And what I mean by this, since, again, participants only saw one design and never both, is that when we asked participants subjective questions about what they felt about the remote user, such as how friendly were they, would you want to work with them again, were they dominant, were they persuasive, the users responded the same across conditions. We couldn't find any statistical significance. But it's interesting because their sentiment did not match their actions because, again, they were more influenced by these larger avatars, and also the larger avatars commanded more of their attention. Additionally, participants express dislike towards the small avatar design. When we just asked their questions in a free response question, just what did they think about the avatar design? And not a single participant in the larger size case expressed any dislike when asked the exact same question. And finally, we noticed that roughly half of all participants assigned to the small size condition voiced surprise when we asked how their expectations of the avatar's appearance matched reality. To wrap this up, knowing how size can influence remote and local user interactions has important design implications. Interactions of particular importance are contexts where the remote user's ability to exert authority are critical to the success of the interaction, such as business applications where negotiations are a key component, medical settings where doctors' orders must be followed for the own well-being and health of their patients, or even educational settings where remote teachers must maintain control of a long-distance classroom. So in summary, we can in fact influence human avatar telepresence interactions by simply adjusting the avatar's size, such as increasing persuasiveness or commanding more attention, and this fact should influence future design decisions made by telepresence avatar designers, especially in areas where remote users must exert increased authority or dominance over the local users. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for having me, and I'll take any questions.
Hi, we have time for a few questions.
Hello, I'm Kojiro from Osaka Institute of Technology. So you tested the equal size avatar and small size avatar. But what would happen if you choose a really tall avatar, like 2 or 3 meter, really big ones? What would you think?
I would imagine, based on our results and just intuition, that we would see increased dominance over, or increased influence, increased dominance, increased submission from the local user, although this is speculation and is really open for future work to look at. What's also interesting is looking at the thresholds. Sure, we saw that there's a difference between the equal size and half a meter size, but when do we start seeing these effects really become significant? At a meter, 2 meters? So there's open questions still about the thresholds of size and even larger than equal, and it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael Neff, UC Davis. Very nice work, very interesting. Thank you. Looked like the avatar was always male, and I'm curious if that's the case and if you would anticipate any gender effects with this.
Yeah, the avatar was male simply because the Confederate was me, a male. I would be interested too in gender effects. I can't speak to it because we didn't switch the Confederate's gender, but again, great question, and future work could look at that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Was a follow-up to that question.
Okay.
What were the gender breakdown for your participants, and did you look at any differences among gender with the participants you had?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, although it was a fairly close split, and we did not find any significance between the results between genders. We did look at that.
Thank you, and let's thank our speaker again. Let's have the other speaker come up.